It is Friday, May 29. Welcome to CGN News. The Jamaican economy contracted by 1.7% in the January to March 2020 period and is projected to decline by 12 to 14% for the April to June quarter. Planning Institute of Jamaica Director General Dr. Wayne Henry reported that the January to March 2020 outturn largely reflected the impact of the implementation of measures to manage the COVID-19 pandemic. That included the closure of international borders to inbound passenger traffic, which curtailed external demand and essentially halted tourist-related activities, curfews that restricted business hours, the closure of all schools, and the implementation of stay-at-home and work-from-home orders. It also reflected the impact of lower capacity utilization within the mining and quarrying industry following the temporary closure of Jamaica's largest alumina refinery in September 2019 to upgrade capacity. It was also based on a continued slowdown in the construction industry, consequent on the completion of major road projects and the slow startup of new ones. There was, however, an uptick in agriculture production and increased manufacturing. During the review quarter, the agriculture, forestry and fishing industry grew as well. Manufacturing, electricity and water supply, transport, storage and communication. CARICOM countries will adopt measures that ensure the safety of their citizens as well as tourists as they prepare to reopen their borders in the post-COVID-19 era, Barbados Prime Minister Mia Mottley said. Mottley, who is also the chair of the 15-member regional integration grouping, told the BBC World Service that regional countries whose economies are highly dependent on the tourism industry had been severely affected by the virus. Heads of CARICOM states have been in dialogue with airlines and cruise lines, but there is no rush to open the region before health and safety protocols are instituted. Mottley stated that CARICOM countries are not going to be driven by a date, but by safe protocols for citizens and visitors alike.
When do you think you'll be able to open up to tourists again, Barbados and the other islands?
Thank you, Matthew. We're not going to be driven by a date. We're going to be driven by protocols that make us safe, because we want to remain safe for our people. We want to remain safe for people who are visiting us. And this is not only Barbados' position, but a number of countries within the Caribbean community. And as you correctly stated, this has been a difficult moment for us all, so that we are trying to balance lives and livelihoods like everywhere else. I listened to your reports earlier about Europe. We're in deep conversations with each other on a common public health protocol within the region. We're also having discussions with the airlines and the cruise industry. But we're not going to be driven by a date. We're going to be driven by a satisfaction that we have safe protocols that keep our workers safe, that keep our people safe, that keep our visitors safe.
For the past 2 weeks, fisherfolk in Choiseul, St. Lucia have been catching flying fish, which had largely disappeared from St. Lucia's waters for over a decade. Groseille fishers made a major catch of about 5,000, which sold off in short order. Fisher Guy Phillips said they are expecting to make some big catches soon. Things are picking up economically. Fishers burn less gas fishing for flying fish than the other fishes. According to Phillips, any fisherman who can make a few big catches of the highly sought-after flying fish will become a millionaire. The disappearance of flying fish from St. Lucia is thought to be related to the prevalence of sargassum seaweed in the water, which disrupts the flying fish's habitat. International news now. Minneapolis has entered the 4th day of unrest in the aftermath of George Floyd's death, with rioters taking over the police department's 3rd precinct building late Thursday night. The breach occurred at about 10 p.m., with rioters setting fires inside the building and outside near the main entrance. The scene came at the end of a day in which protesters in Minnesota and beyond demanded that 4 now-fired officers be arrested in a case that has generated nationwide outrage. Video captured a white police officer pressing his knee into George Floyd's neck in a band maneuver on Monday as Floyd repeatedly said, "I can't breathe."
There's water, so please. I can't breathe, officer.
Floyd later died. Police released a statement just after 10 p.m. saying, in part, in the interest of the safety of our personnel, the Minneapolis Police Department evacuated the 3rd precinct of its staff. Protesters forcibly entered the building and have ignited several fires. The Minnesota National Guard said 500 soldiers arrived in Minneapolis-St. Paul and surrounding suburbs late Thursday night to protect life, preserve property, and the right to peacefully demonstrate. President Trump called the protesters thugs while suggesting military intervention and warning in a tweet that there could be additional violence if the chaos continued. When the looting starts, the shooting starts, the president wrote. Trump's tweet was later flagged by Twitter for glorifying violence. Trump also called the mayor weak. Taiwan will provide the people of Hong Kong with necessary assistance, President Tsai Ing-wen said, after thousands in the Chinese-ruled territory protested against Beijing's plan to impose. Regarded as the runaway Chinese province, Taiwan has a long history of fighting against Beijing's efforts to thwart their independence. Taiwan has become a refuge for a small but growing number of pro-democracy protesters fleeing Hong Kong, which has been convulsed since last year by anti-Beijing and anti-Hong Kong government protests. Hong Kong police fired tear gas and water cannon to disperse thousands of people who rallied on Sunday to protest against Beijing's move to introduce new national security laws. Writing on her Facebook page late on Sunday, Ms. Tsai said the proposed legislation was a serious threat to Hong Kong's freedoms and judicial independence. Taiwan has no law on refugees that could be applied to Hong Kong protesters who seek asylum on the island. Its laws do promise, though, to help Hong Kong citizens whose safety and liberty are threatened for political reasons. The number of Hong Kong immigrants to Taiwan jumped 150% in the first 4 months of 2020 from the same period last year, official data shows. China has accused supporters of Taiwan independence of colluding with the protesters. China believes Ms. Tsai to be a separatist bent on declaring the island's formal independence. Ms. Tsai says Taiwan is already an independent country, called the Republic of China its official name. In Jamaica, Minister of Labour and Social Security and Northeast St. Anne MP Shahini Robinson has died. Robinson, who had been battling cancer for some time, died at her home in St. Anne on Friday. She was 66 years old. Prime Minister Andrew Holness and National Security Minister Dr. Horace Chang visited Robinson at her home days before her death. Manhunts have begun after hundreds of people, some with the coronavirus, fled quarantine centers in Zimbabwe and Malawi, while authorities worry they will spread COVID-19 in countries whose health systems can be rapidly overwhelmed. In Malawi, more than 400 people recently repatriated from South Africa and fled a center at a stadium in Blantyre, jumping over a fence or strolling out the gate while police and health workers watched. Police and health workers told reporters they were unable to stop them as they lacked adequate protective gear. At least 46 escapees had tested positive for the virus. Some of those who fled told reporters they had bribed police. And in Zimbabwe, police spokesman Paul Nyathi says officers were hunting down more than 100 people who escaped from centers where a 21-day quarantine is mandatory for those returning from abroad. Nearly all of Zimbabwe's 75 new cases this week came from the centers that hold hundreds of people who have returned, sometimes involuntarily, from neighboring South Africa and Botswana. That's it for CGN News. Thanks for tuning in. I'm Scott Wilson.